Today's event is part of York Festival of Ideas Online. Although in a different format, the festival continues to aim to enhance York's reputation as a city of ideas and innovation through offering the highest caliber of public events. The 2020 festival has over 40 online events offering an inspiring program for all ages. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the adventure we are about to take you on.
Wow, we're in the future. There was a computer voice reading out things to us. Isn't that exciting? It's the future of reality.
Hi, and welcome to this session on the future of reality for the York Festival of Ideas. I am Susan Halfpenny and I work in IT services, and I'm here with my colleagues
Jesper
and Siobhan Dunlop.
And we're going to be chatting to you via this medium for the next sort of, say, 45 minutes about our thoughts on the future of reality. What are we going to have a look at today? Well, before we start thinking about the future of reality, we thought it might be first sort of timely to maybe think about current reality. What is our current situation? So at the minute, I'm sure you, like me and Steph and Siobhan, sat looking at a screen. So we're viewing our reality through a screen. When we first said that we were going to do this event, there is no way that we thought we would be sat in our various houses, in our various realities, connecting, talking to a virtual audience. We hope there are some people out there, I should say as well, because at the minute I feel like I'm just talking to myself. Well, no, actually I've got Siobhan and Steph here, thankfully, so I'm not just talking to myself. But our current situation is that we are viewing our reality through these screens. And we've got a couple of shots up on the screen here. We've got Abba in a Google Meet. I love a Google Meet me, but it seems to have decided to crash my computer now and then. So we're all moving to Zoom now, aren't we? So we're all in these Zoom meetings. It's become that kind of reality. So we're used to now seeing our reality through these screens. So it has really maybe changed how we connect with each other, how we build our relationships, and how we see our sense of how we connect with the world. We've had to use this technology. And when we were first coming up with the idea for this event and thinking about the future of reality, we did not think that we were going to be in this reality. We didn't think we were going to have a pandemic. We were all going to be so reliant on technology. But some of the things that we're going to be picking up on are really focused on that technology and how it is infiltrating, how it's in most of our lives. And so more so now, even more than we thought when we were first writing this presentation. So let's go and move on to think about our digital world and the digital world that we live in. So we've acknowledged the fact that we're all connecting at the minute through the window of our screen, whether that be a phone that we're looking at this, maybe we're watching this on the big screen TV. I'd like the idea if you're watching us on this big screen TV or on your laptop. We're all connecting through the digital. But even before the pandemic, we were in a situation where digital had infiltrated everything that we did. It was we'd come across terms such as we'd entered a second machine age. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. Don't ask me what the second and third were. I don't necessarily know, but we're in this fourth and we're working in this thing. And the whole idea is that technology isn't just used for when we're at work now. It's not just used for entertainment, it is used for how we build our relationships with each other. Pretty much everything we do, the whole infrastructure of our modern world is built on technology. You know, if we want to do our banking, we'll connect with technology, we'll connect with the internet and that kind of thing. If we want to connect and see each other, we're using technologies in that kind of way. Entertainment, we'll use maybe we'll use the internet, maybe we'll watch a streaming platform to view entertainment. And education as well, we'll use that through online. So it really has become something that we connect with all the time now. It's not something that we're going to get away from. It is part of our reality, the technology that we use. And it's not just about us consuming this technology. Part of this, we're using these various platforms and the various technologies that we interact with, whether it be the internet, whether it be our phone and that kind of thing, various technologies, we're using that to kind of find information, to find out various knowledge, to connect in that kind of way. But we don't just consume it as well. We're not just using this technology to consume. We also have the ability as well to create in these platforms as well. So we start to add to this version of reality, because we start to share our own version of reality, our own events. So we'll share pictures of things that we might do on Instagram. We'll share our posts about how we feel on Facebook. We'll share our thoughts on Twitter and ideas and opinions. So we start to create and we start to add and share within these platforms and build these connections within that. So it's not that we're just using these technologies to consume or just to do our work or to find out information. We are also using that to create and present ourselves and present what we view as our reality. And we do all this through a particular lens. So if we think about that, we're not just doing this in a free form. When we're engaging with our technologies, when we're engaging with reality, when we're sharing information, we do that there via various platforms and operating systems. So right now I'm working on Mac, so I'm on iOS. Siobhan, I think she's got a Mac as well that she's working on at the moment, very ancient one that is about to pack up from work. And Steph, she's working on, I think she's gone with the Windows. So as part of this reality, as we use technology in everything that we're engaging with near enough now, and then we're sharing things about ourselves using this technology, it's not sort of free form that we're all doing in different ways. We have to have some standard formats, some platforms, some way of engaging with that. So we'll use our operating system to connect with people, to view the various platforms, and then we'll share on different things on the internet. So maybe we're sharing our pictures on Instagram. Maybe we're sharing our posts. I've mentioned Facebook. Maybe that's where we've built our community. Maybe we're using Twitter. Maybe we're finding our information through Google. So all of this means that we're shaping our reality because we're posting and we're feeding into this, but the platforms that we use also shape our reality and what we do and what we share. So we've got these boxes, these areas that we would use to share that information.
Yeah, but a lot of the things that you've just mentioned, Susan, are quite sort of locked down boxes. They're proprietary software, and within those, it's just basically a black box, and it's hard to know what's inside. And that's quite important for us to understand how they work and what's happening when we are using them. I mean, let's take a historical example. So I've got here a mechanical Turk. And that mechanical Turk can play chess. It's basically a robot, an automaton, that has been programmed to be able to play chess really well, like to a grandmaster level. So we can go along and we can place our little move on the chessboard, and this robot is so brilliant that it will beat us every time. So okay, let's see what's going on within the black box of this particular application. Let's see what's in there. So if I just reveal a bit of the cabinet there, we've got quite a lot of technical gubbins. Now, there's clearly a load of machinery happening here. You know, the company that's made this are boasting about how high tech their piece of kit is, but they're only showing us this little portion. They're only showing us a little bit of what's involved. There's a great big chunk of the cabinet there that's missing. So maybe if we ask nicely, we can have a peek inside there as well. Oh, it's not a piece of high-tech machinery after all. It's just a little grandmaster is sat in there playing chess. So it turns out that this piece of locked-down software that we couldn't see within actually wasn't everything that they were telling us. It wasn't the wonderful piece of well-engineered machinery we were led to believe. Now, not all software, not all applications out there are locked down like this. Now, there's this whole open source movement. A lot of open software exists, and maybe it's better to have the open source so we can see what's going on inside. I mean, to take an example. So Wikipedia, and it's not software, it's an online encyclopedia, but it's an online encyclopedia that is open, that anybody can edit. And okay, you would think that sounds like a recipe for disaster, because I can go on there and start typing any old rubbish in there. I could just write loads of abuse about somebody. I could just talk absolute nonsense. I can do loads of vandalism on Wikipedia. How can it possibly work? How can it be remotely reliable? But actually, there's loads of people looking at Wikipedia who can edit Wikipedia, because anybody can edit Wikipedia, or most of the articles at any rate. There's this Linus's law, which is named after the guy who invented Linux, called given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. In other words, if enough people can see something and have a look at it and suggest changes, then you get rid of all the problems in it. You get rid of all the bugs in the software, if it's a piece of software. You get rid of all the disinformation in Wikipedia, if it's an online encyclopedia like Wikipedia. So now Siobhan can come on and look at the rubbish that I've written and say, actually, no, that's a load of rubbish, I'm going to correct that. And I might get into an edit war with her, but then Susan comes along, and Susan's adding, to the Siobhan side of things and saying, no, look, there's a consensus here. You reach a consensus. You reach a crowd-sourced understanding of something. And the idiots like me get drowned out as part of this. And in our software case, all those errors that were originally in the code, all those loopholes in terms of the security of it, everything that could possibly go wrong with this program, loads of people are looking at it and they're saying, actually, no, that's rubbish. Let's fix that bit. So if it was like a software problem, if it was like a security problem rather, then okay, that security problem is out there on the internet for anybody to exploit. But things are hopefully moving at such a pace that people spot that security flaw and get it changed quickly as possible. Whereas if I've spotted a security flaw in some piece of proprietary software, some closed access software, then I can sit there happily exploiting that. It may be quite a long time until somebody notices. Now, okay, fair enough, right. If open source software is so good, why are we recording this in Zoom rather than in one of the open source equivalents? Well, there is also this kind of 1970s IT adage of nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. There's a degree of security in the big conglomerate, the big industry that everybody knows and has been around for a while. And also, there's quite a lot of technical support usually involved in the price as well. You're paying a lot of money for this, you get some sort of technical back end helping you out when things go wrong. So there are factors involved in why we do end up using things like Zoom and like all manner of other proprietary systems, like I'm using Windows and they're using the Apple stuff, rather than the three of us using Linux. But there's the pros and cons of all that.
Speaking of mysterious black boxes, there's those algorithm things as well. So we've looked at software, we've been talking about platforms, but there's another area of the kind of words about tech that people throw around a lot at the moment that we haven't looked at yet and that really shape our reality, and that is algorithms. So people don't tend to know necessarily what they are. The picture I've given here might be what you think of when you hear the word algorithms. It's like the Matrix. It looks a bit like mysterious computer code in a darkened room. And if you don't understand them, you don't know what they're doing or the effect they can have on your life. But that's not actually what an algorithm is. An algorithm is actually just a decision-making rules, basically. An algorithm is the decisions that the computer has to make. And those decision-making rules are decided by people. They are created. So it's a bit like the decision-making process you might find in a flowchart. So it might say, if this, then that. You might go off in different tangents and branches. They could come back in different ways. And this is how platforms decide what to show you, is that people then write up these algorithms, these decision-making rules, into computer code so the computer understands them. But ultimately, the thing that's this big concept that Google uses, that Facebook uses, that Netflix uses, all manner of other platforms and things use, are about these rules that are created by people. This isn't a mysterious computer concept. These are rules that are designed by people to maximize the things they're looking for. So to give you the best search results, to make sure you see the content that Facebook thinks you're most likely to engage with, to make you see the films they think you're most likely to watch on Netflix and ignore the ones you're never going to click on, because their whole point is showing you the content that you're going to click on. So algorithms are about these rules, but why do people care about them then? If they're just a bunch of rules that just exist, why do we really care? But the thing is, these rules are making decisions for us and about us all the time. So not just what search results you see, though that's pretty important if you're Googling something important or not, but also things like your credit score. Algorithms decide what offers you'll see online. Algorithms will decide all sorts of stuff that you interact with, all sorts of things about your life. And they're being used in more and more areas of the world as we find ways to automate processes, to speed up our human lives, and to find ways to make processes easier. And that can be really good. That is giving us loads of time. We don't have to read the whole of Netflix to decide on a film to watch. But to design these algorithms, values have to be given to them. They have to be based on something, some kind of value system. So you have to decide, what would be yes or no? What gives you different things? And these aren't neutral. So these are often based on previous data, which is also flawed, and they're also based on human biases. So Cathy O'Neill, in her book of the same name, uses the phrase weapons of mass destruction as a way of referring to particular algorithms that have potential for a lot of what she calls destruction, so danger, problems in society. There's dangerous power in algorithms if we don't know what they're doing and we don't know how they're making decisions, basically, because they affect the reality we see. They affect the internet we see, ultimately.
So let's think about what we can see, because what we can see is important and what we can see is constrained. I'm going to tell you a story. The story of the young Buddha as he was growing up, ensconced within the walls of the palace, protected from the outside world. And then on his 29th birthday, he goes out beyond those walls, beyond the edge of the garden, out into the real world where he sees poverty and disease and death and suffering, and has a life-changing experience as a consequence of it. And isn't the internet a bit like that? Let's take another example. Let's imagine that we are stood here in this corner of the Heslington campus here at York, looking at the walls of the walled garden, and let's say we're doing it 100 years ago. Okay, if we're doing it 100 years ago, we might get kicked out because it's somebody's garden. But let's say we're the gardener there. Our world is quite limited. We have Heslington. We have down the road we've got a big city in York that we can hang out in. But we've also we've got newspapers. We've got other forms of media communication taking place, but actually we're quite restricted. Let's take a slightly easy example. Let's go a bit more modern. Let's go to the early 90s. So the early 90s, just before we all started getting on the internet as a mass community, we had 4 television channels in this country. We had a few different newspapers of various different flavors and qualities, but that was our window on the world. Maybe we could travel. We could get on an aeroplane and go to Marbella or somewhere. If we had a bit more money, maybe we could travel a bit further afield. But actually, the amount of money we have limits our ability to get around the place. And actually, our eye on the world, for most of us, was very much just the box in the corner of the room, or the noises coming through the radio or whatever. Now, the internet kind of opened up the walls of our garden quite a lot when you think about it, because suddenly we're bypassing those bits of media. We're bypassing the lens upon the world that they present. And we are able to engage with people from around the world, or at least engage with people who can speak English from around the world if we can only speak English. And we're only engaging with those people who can afford the internet. But still, the walled garden has been broken down. Our world is suddenly much bigger. Our ability to communicate with others is much broader. Our horizons are much broader.
But there's been some talk that perhaps that isn't quite so true, and that perhaps on the internet we're actually a lot more trapped than that. That perhaps we've actually recreated this walled garden on the internet for ourselves now. So there's this idea of a filter bubble, essentially, which is this idea that on the internet you just consume the kind of content you're interested in. You stay in a little bubble, and that means that you miss out on everything else. You only see the specific things you're interested in. Those algorithms only throw up the content that you want to see, and you don't get to actually see that whole world out there like the internet could have brought. So there's this sort of side to this where perhaps the internet isn't as wide open anymore. Perhaps we're actually stuck in little areas. But to really look at this, we need to see like how this kind of, these filter bubbles, this idea of this personalization, where we all get our own edited version of the internet, how that might work and sort of why it's relevant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a little look. I'm going to search Google. I'm going to search Google for the word reality, because I'm doing some research for this talk, so it was useful, check what it meant, get my definition in order. So I search for it and I get some results. But what I noticed is I actually got over 1 billion results, and I don't have that much time to read the whole internet on the word reality. So I really hope that Google's put this in a nice order for me, because otherwise I'm going to get a bit stuck. But so far I've got a definition. It's made it quite easy. And as I start look through my results, I've got some other questions people have asked that are similar. We've got a Wikipedia article there. So looking back at the Wikipedia option here, Google thinks it's a good one for us to read. Dictionary definition. I've got this nice little box where Google kind of puts together some images that perhaps don't mean reality for me, but Google is putting together some content. It's giving me a version of this internet that it's found. If I keep going, I've got some different videos I could be watching. It's offering me some different options here, all on the first page. All of these options come straight from the first page of Google, main page anyone's ever reached on any Google search, really. But as I dig a bit further, I realise that it keeps going. You know, this is on page, this isn't even that far down in page like 6, and already I'm getting weird stuff like the ability to spy on people, apparently, and some sort of mixed reality things in a film that's called Reality. So that's not really what I'm looking for. I think this was only about page 6. And then I keep going, I just keep clicking on every single one. I want to be really thorough. And I get to page 26, and Google basically says, don't bother looking any further. That's it. Out of those billion results, 260 were probably all we could bother to offer you, and you haven't read most of them. You haven't even really looked at them. So what's happening is the internet is far too big for us to read, obviously. So we're getting edited versions to make it consumable. And algorithms are choosing which things we see. So the algorithms start to build up those walls. They start to create our filter bubbles so that we don't get on onslaught, not only by too much content, but by content we don't want to see. You know, if I really want to like ducks, but I hate geese, then it will start to learn that, and I won't have to deal with any content about geese, which would be great. You know, just not having to think about geese would really make things easier. But what this does is it kind of complicates the idea of using the internet. It's not a big open space anymore. And as has been discussed, there is no standard version of Google anymore. If you search for something, it's not the same as everyone else. So Eli Pariser has done a TED talk. It was in 2011, but he's continued to do talks and write books about the idea of filter bubbles. And so we're looking at this idea that if you search for something and your friend searches for something, the same search terms in Google, you could get completely different results. There's no longer one version of Google reality for you. It will all be based on things like where you are, what you've previously searched for, other things that Google knows about you because you've linked to your Google account or your search history or anything. So that's really useful in some ways. You know, if I'm in the UK and I search for a product, I want UK options. I don't want to know I could buy it if I was in Australia, but I can't here. That's just going to make me sad. But if my friend was in Australia, then that'd be great that they could buy it and maybe they could ship it to me. Really useful. But what it means is we only see certain versions of the internet, which gives us certain versions of the world, certain versions about reality. So it starts to build up these bubbles and we become kind of trapped and we don't know what's outside. So that's the biggest problem. We're in our walled garden, it's very mixed metaphors here, our filter bubble, and we don't know what's outside, but we also don't know how the walls were created. We don't know what those algorithms are doing. We don't know how Google chose what we see. And Google's answer for that was, if you knew how it would work, you could game Google. So if you knew how their search algorithm works, the decisions it makes to show you content, then all the companies that want you to read their website could just game that system to make sure you read it. So that's the reason they give you for you not being able to see their algorithm. But what it means is we don't actually know why we see what we do. And that means we don't have to change it. If you're only seeing articles, if I start just seeing articles about ducks and I get really good at reading them and I think perhaps I should see what the geese are saying, I might not even know how I could find some geese content because Google just won't show me any. If I search geese, it's like, did you mean ducks? And I'm like, no, I didn't. So we don't know where these walls are, and that's where it starts to get difficult.
Yeah, so as Siobhan suggested there, we are actually in this fractured reality because we've started to consume our information via these platforms, via Google, which Google is no longer standard. So we all have our own version of Google, which is based on our behaviours, based on what we like, based on what we've previously searched, who we connect with, what we click on. So we start to get this kind of personalised view. Now, that's good. As Siobhan's picked up on, there's lots of positives to that so that you can get through to that information. But what we're living with now is this fractured reality. So this fractured area where we're all getting access to information that's filtered via various previous searches that we've done, our behaviours. So we've created our own walled garden, to go back to Steph's metaphor. But the key thing that's really a problem with this is once we start to have this fractured reality, we lose a sense of accountability because we're seeing things that other people might not be seeing. So it makes it much harder for us to start to trace the evidence, for us to start to consider the counter argument, for us to start to broaden our sphere knowledge, because maybe, you know, we've always been interested, as Siobhan was saying, in one thing. You know, she used ducks, and then we want to find out about geese. If we don't see that, it makes it very difficult for us to have a very balanced argument and balanced view of the world. We're becoming more insular in our views. We're becoming more focused on one thing that we've got there. And, you know, if we take the idea that, if we take idea of authority, so we think of that actually being a fact, that actually being something that is said, that's stated, that's the authoritative source, so to speak. So we have that, and we know that because it sits within context. Maybe it's within the institutions we're doing that, you know, we know the Oxford English Dictionary has gone through a publishing process, so we know that that's an authority. We start to use that, and within our context, within our broader society, within the broader information landscape, we can see where that information sits. But if we're only getting fragmented bits of information that's based on our previous searches, our ability to be able to build that context to then construct the authority, because we know where all the various bits of information have come from, the different information outlets, so to speak, becomes much harder, because it's being controlled in a particular way by the algorithms that are there, by the platforms that we're using, that we're just seeing that information, which, as I say, there are lots of helpful things to this. There's so much information out there that we can't really plough through it all. But when we start to use this to build our values, to build how we think about society, if we've only got a fractured, or we've only got a narrow window into the understanding of the world, then we're not going to be able to really think, really criticise, or have a critical lens into that. It makes it much more difficult because we're not seeing all the various different points of view and being able to develop our argument and our knowledge based on all these different ideas that are there that really help us as a society to see different viewpoints and that kind of thing. We don't want to see it through one narrow lens. And the other side of this sort of situation that we found ourselves in, with this fractured reality where we're seeing things that we want to see, is where we start to kind of really have this bespoke and personal. Now, we've picked up on that a bit, that we've been searching so it understands that. But then by those searches, the companies that we search on, they end up having this kind of behaviour surplus. So if I'm always searching on Google, it's trying to help me. It's using that data to pick up where my location is, what I like to search for. You know, it'll correct my spellings for me based on previous spellings. It'll advertise things to me. The same when I go onto Facebook, the people that I follow, the people that I'm friends with, that it'll start to learn things about me. And with that, it understands my behaviour. It creates this bubble that we've been talking about, this bubble, my version of reality that I like to use. But there is some vulnerability with this, because Siobhan mentioned that Google don't want to share their computer code. They don't want to tell us how their algorithms, how their decision making works, because obviously that would give company advantage to others. But actually we found ourselves in a society where actually some of this behaviour that we've shared isn't protected in the same way. So this data that is gathered, say by Facebook, and we've seen this with Cambridge Analytica kind of scandal and Brexit and the US election, where we've shared all this information, well, they've not protected it like they would do with their algorithms. They've kind of sold that surplus onto other people. So they've sold our reality, what we like, who we are, to who knows who, or they've hacked into it. And they're using that information. And that may be used once again to help us find out further information, maybe to sell us a few things. But it can also be used to provide very, very bespoke and personal and targeted advertising and information to us. So this takes us right back around to that accountability again. So if they've got all this information on us, the platforms have got that, initially it's used to help us frame our reality, so we've got that information there. But then as it gets so much more personal, we can end up in that situation where I'm seeing advertising which is just for me. It's saying, Susan, wouldn't you like to see this? Now, if it says my name, maybe I realise that's personal advertising, but maybe it's something that's quite emotional or emotive, that plays to my vulnerabilities, that makes me want to think in a particular way. And that's where we can see that there's quite a danger to having this fractured reality with no real accountability there.
So Susan mentioned Cambridge Analytica and about some of this stuff around really targeted things. And where some of the danger can come with this is things about mis and disinformation. So what is called mostly fake news at the moment. People are using the term fake news a lot, and they have been for the past few years. So the idea that things can be fact or fiction or somewhere in between, and it's hard to discern that if things are being really specifically targeted to you. But before we get into that, we're going to have a look at the fact that this isn't new. Not being sure what's fact and fiction, being given information that perhaps is presented in a different way, isn't new at all. So we don't need to think that this is just like the evils of technology, although this example is going to use some technology, just not the kind we're talking about. So my example, and you might have guessed if you recognise what that picture might be, is in 1938, there was a quite infamous radio broadcast of War of the Worlds. It was on Halloween. Orson Welles did a whole big plan. So War of the Worlds is a fictional novel that was adapted in the style of a news report for the radio. So basically, it apparently caused an awful lot of panic, as a lot of Americans thought Martians were now landing, because that's exactly how this fictional story was being presented as a real news report. And so, you know, there's all this media reporting that everyone suddenly was terrified and they were running around, you know, America paranoid that Martians were landing. But the thing with that is, that's the story, and we all lots of people have heard that story, but it might not really be that true. It might actually be that a few people worried a bit, a few people flipped channels on the radio and didn't realise it was a War of the Worlds adaptation. And the media got hold of that and thought, oh, this is a good story. So suddenly something that was fiction, and then people thought it was fact, and then it was very fictionalized, and it all is very complicated. And the media has always been there to do things, to present things as perhaps more fictional or less fictional, depending on what makes a good story, what will engage people. So this idea of how we can engage people has always been blurring the lines between facts and fiction. But what technology has done is it's kind of changed a few different areas of it. So one of the things it's done is it's kind of opened up wider opportunities in terms of the internet, in terms of digital technologies, for being able to share information. Now I'm going to say share rather than spread, because a lot of the time this is going to be misinformation. This isn't going to be people who are purposely trying to lie to you. This is going to be people who got a questionably sourced a bit of information in a WhatsApp message and passed it on to someone else. But it opens it up. If you want to be particularly cynical about it, you can call it the democratization of propaganda, as James Bridle has done. But whatever you want to call it, this has opened it up. So there's much more opportunity to share information that perhaps isn't true, but present it like it is. And another thing we've got here, and coming back to Cambridge Analytica here, is scale. So with so many people using these platforms, so many Facebook users, so many people using Twitter and everything else, so many people using Google, it's suddenly, you can reach a lot more people. It's not just someone standing on a street corner telling you that the world's about to end. You can just post it on Facebook and see how many people notice. Or you can harvest 50 million Facebook profiles, work out the people who are most likely to believe that the world's ending, and send them loads of targeted messages telling them that it is. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not, they're the people you've chosen who are most likely to believe it. So what does this mean? Well, we start to splinter realities, essentially. Some people believe certain things, other people believe other things, and people are hearing the things they believe. So if you've been targeted with some certain bits of information, and it might maybe not all true, you might start searching online to find out more about them. And you fall further into the rabbit hole of just seeing content about these ideas and not hearing about all the sides of the story necessarily. And it kind of leads to wider questions that aren't even about technology. To bring it back to, it's not all technology. It's about why people are believing it. Why are people believing these things? Are there becoming divides in our realities, and technology is just making this worse?
Yeah, so we might have started to have these divides, and we've got these different realities, maybe we've got these different views, we've got these bubbles. But I just want to think about even beyond this sort of fiction that might have started to maybe a bit more fantasy. Because actually, when we're using technologies, a lot of the time, we're using technologies for entertainment. Actually, when I think about technology, when I think about sometimes the internet, apps and that kind of thing, I think of gaming. I think of games, I think of it as a way that is an escape from my current reality to go into a new reality. So maybe for you, it's sitting watching a film, and then after you've watched the film, you like to go and chat with people about the film online, or maybe about a genre of film, so you've built a community in that, or maybe you like to play a particular game. So you know here that you've got this sense of a different reality, escapism, a fantasy that you're living in. And this is all quite useful for us. Actually, there's research in this area that gives an idea that actually having that escapism, being able to go into a different reality where it's, you know, maybe fantasy, maybe we can make our own rules, maybe there's a little bit of competition there, maybe that helps us, you know, something that we're interested in, we like to compete and that kind of thing. Maybe it's just engaging with others on a topic that we like. And all this can have quite a good effect on our well-being, being able to relax and rewind and unwind as we're in our own little worlds and our own version of reality. So let me take you into my own version of reality then. I like to play Jurassic World game. So the game that I play is, I've got my own Jurassic World park. I've got about 150 dinosaurs there. But other than my 150 dinosaurs, I'm about the only other person there. In this game, I can connect with other people, but mainly it's just to fight my dinosaurs to win prizes. So I'm not necessarily in my, you know, to relax. I'm not motivated for my well-being. I'm not motivated really by this competition element and by chatting to other people. I'm just like quite happy in my solitary reality, my version where I've got my dinosaurs and I just tend to them. So that's really nice. It's very confined. I've got this app on my phone and it's all locked down and it's just there. and nothing tracks there. But as we've looked with a lot of the other technologies that we've come across in this talk so far, not everything is just as confined to one box on my phone. So lots of games we may actually, if you're gaming or if you're joining a community, you've got that bit of a fantasy, you're interested in a particular genre of movie, you'll probably be connecting with other people. Not everyone is as like insular as myself, who just likes to be solitary. You'll connect with other people. And actually, a lot of the sort of social media platforms that we use can even be considered as a game. If we looked at Charlie Brooker in 2013 in his How Video Games Changed the World, he mentioned Twitter being a game and that winning that because it's got that gaming element of that competition that we do that. And that's actually built into a lot of the social media platforms that we use, whether it be Instagram, you want to be liked, whether it be Facebook, you want to be liked on there as well, and people to connect with you with that. So we can kind of start ending up in this area where our boundaries between our fantasy world are blurred with the reality. Those lines of where it was our safe space, where we were our solitary area, we start to welcome more people in, and then it starts to become part of actually how we connect with the real world, so to speak. And that's probably quite nice as well anyway, as we grow our sphere. We don't want to just sit here in isolation. If we start to talk to people, most of the time in this like sort of fantasy land, we'll start to meet people who have the same beliefs as us. So if we're in a particular Facebook group where we're all talking about dinosaurs because we really like that, we'll meet other people and they'll support our beliefs, and that's really nice. It's self-affirming if people like what you like, if they support your version of reality, if they back up your views. So we've got this sprawl now. We're not just in this one app, we're now in this forest, and we're now in this reality with everyone else. So that kind of version of reality has got a bit further. But this can sometimes get that what started off as a positive where we really knew it was a fantasy, then became a little bit blurred in the middle where we started to connect with other people, and it became part of a platform, which was how we connected with the real world. So those boundaries became blurred. And then it can get even to the darker side of, I've been talking about dinosaurs, I can't really think there's anything quite controversial about me talking about dinosaurs. I don't know, I'm not connecting with lots of groups on this, so there may well be. But we can end up, if our views are self-affirming, what if the views we have aren't something that is particularly kind, isn't particularly running to the ideals of honesty and looking after other people, supporting people? They aren't good principles for holding up our society. And we end up in these groups which started off maybe with, it was a bit of fun, but now it has become part of a reality. And maybe we start to believe things that are fundamentally untrue. And we start to share those views with other people. And actually, maybe we're not even sharing those views, but we become anxious about that. We become anxious about what's being said. And we can no longer, in this new darker reality, we can no longer identify what is the fact and what is the fiction, what is the gaming platform and what is the platform where we consume our news. It becomes quite a scary place for us to be in, where we're a little lost in this darkened world.
Yeah, but this again is nothing new, really. I mean, here are the cotton leaf areas. So the start of the 20th century, these two girls took some photos, and these photos clearly demonstrate that in their garden there were fairies. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't fairies in their garden, but I am saying that these fairies here on this picture are not real fairies. And, Siobhan was saying how maybe not everyone was taken in by these things. And I don't think everyone was taken in by these fairies, but certain people were. Arthur Conan Doyle was saying, oh, they're clearly fairies and all this kind of thing. But they're clearly not fairies. They're clearly paper fairies. You just have to look at it to see that they are paper fairies. So, okay, what was going on? Well, photography was still relatively, in its infancy at this stage. People probably hadn't seen many paper fairies in a photograph like this and in this sort of composition. So, okay, give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's take a slightly more recent example then. So Susan's favourite film, I think we've already established, is probably Jurassic Park. Well, when Jurassic Park came out in the 90s, one of the major selling points was these computer-generated dinosaurs that they got and how amazingly realistic they were compared to just the old models that you used to have in films. And they looked really good. Although, now, were we to look at them, they don't look so impressive, really. We can tell that they're computer-generated dinosaurs, that they aren't real dinosaurs. We've learnt certain certain ticks about how a computer-generated image looks. Their sort of shininess, that bounciness, that almost not sort of quite light on its feet, really, not sufficiently realistic, shall we say. There is something that gives it away. It's like the whole uncanny valley thing when you do a computer-generated human and they don't look quite right. There's something not quite there about it. And so even a big blockbuster film like Star Wars Rogue One, where you've got a computer-generated Peter Cushing, it looks like a computer-generated Peter Cushing. It doesn't look like Peter Cushing. But as technology gets better and better, so these kind of things get better and better. And I mean, here is a sort of deep fake idea where you can use a kind of computer-generated meat puppet mask and impose that upon a person. So here is Jim Meskimen, an impersonator, doing impressions of various actors and doing them with his face, because a computer, or in this case, a guy called Shamook using a computer, produced a bit of software, a sort of manipulated reality, this deep fake technology to give this guy lots of different faces. And it's very hard to sort of see what's going on. You can imagine a future reality where we see videos of politicians saying outrageous things. And it turns out it wasn't the politician saying an outrageous thing. It was a computer-generated politician saying an outrageous thing. It was somebody in their bedroom with one of these digital masks on, pretending to be the politician. I mean, I know we've got enough politicians to say outrageous things anyway, but this future reality in which we have all sorts of outrageous things being said, and we can't tell that reality from the real reality, that's genuinely scary, isn't it? But maybe that's only scary from this side of that reality. Because maybe when we get there, and we've kind of had it for a couple of years or so, we'll start to learn the ticks of that as well. We'll start to learn how that works. We'll start to look at this video here and see where all the flaws are, all the little imperfections of all this technology, and be able to point at it and say that that's clearly a paper fairy. That's clearly a deep fake video. So as we get used to new technologies, so we get used to understanding the flaws. Like the fact that when I watch a video on television, and I can see the difference between when they're using videotape and a film, but my mum can't, because she never really sort of picked up on that difference. It's a generational thing. And as we get used to these new technologies, we start to get used to all those little ticks. We start to be able to build up the literacies, the understandings of how these technologies appear, and we hopefully start to be able to discern the truth a little bit more.
And now we've looked a lot through this talk at the realities in terms of through the screen, actually. And Steph was picking up there of actually we'll develop more skills to be able to discern what we view on the screen. But the other part of the future of reality, when we're talking about technology, is sort of the virtual reality and the augmented reality, we didn't feel we could do this talk without actually mentioning these, as they're big on the horizon, how we might entertain ourselves and how we might engage with the world as well. So we talked a lot about how there's been the blurring between what we see, our virtual world and the physical world and the society that we live in. But these realities take that one step even further. So for our virtual reality, we are still seeing it very much through the screen, through a headpiece, through that kind of thing. We're using that to connect to an online world. We're using that to escape. So I can't wait till I get my virtual reality version of my Jurassic World game and I can really, really walk among those dinosaurs. I mean, the graphics are pretty decent on the app on my phone at the minute, but when I'm properly in that cage and running from that dinosaur, that's going to make it for me. And that's great. That'll be another immersive experience for me within that reality. That fantasy, it's not bleeding into the real world, although I will maybe need to clear some space in my room so that I don't bump into things as I'm wandering around in that, because although I might feel that I'm in that Jurassic world, I'll still just be in my living room with my husband thinking, what's she doing now? Oh, she'll be with the dinosaurs, that kind of thing. So we've got that. So we're in the real world there, but we're connecting, it's taking us elsewhere. But there's another area as well of technology development that we're moving into at the minute, which is really quite interesting, that blurs the boundaries even more than that virtual reality where we're actually escaping reality, to augmented reality. So what we mean by augmented reality is when we're using things within the physical world. It could be a picture, it could be a sign, it could be a book. We're using that kind of our physical environment, our physical world, to augment it with technology. So what we will do is, I can find my phone, and you've got your phone, you've got iPad that you would use. You can hold that up, and by holding that up, you get further information. So we've done this actually with students for digital creativity. We got them to work with the Yorkshire Dictionary, and then they put together a series of pictures that you could then hold your phone up to, and it would tell you the dictionary definition of that. So that's a place where we're using the technology, and it's about in our world. It starts to affect how we interact with the physical places that we're in, so that we start to see that. And we talked a lot in this talk about it becoming quite personalised as well. So when we were using augmented reality, it was a standard, it was a standalone piece of information. Everyone was going to see the same. They had to have an app on their phone that would then show that. But actually, if we become more and more personalised, you could see that we could move into this augmented reality where I'd get a different piece of information when I hold my phone up over that picture than Steph would or Siobhan would, because it would be based on their preferences. Maybe it's just a little bit different that it says their name first. Oh, welcome, Siobhan. Welcome to this exhibition on dinosaurs. Of course, you'll be going to that as well as I would be going to it. That kind of thing. So it can be, it could be quite an innocent thing, but it might be that actually some of the things that we've been exploring that maybe were a bit unsettling do cascade into the physical world. So these are new areas that we're starting to experience now, and they offer us yet more realities to come.
Well, we've got to be careful about these new technologies that we're inviting into our homes and into our lives. I mean, we've reached a stage now where if we have a relative called Alexa, it's very hard to talk to them because, Alexa's there in the corner trying to answer all the questions. Sorry if I'm setting off your Alexa. Alexa, what's 2 + 2? Now, the very fuzzy picture I've got here is of Winston Smith, of Peter Cushing again, in the 1954 BBC adaptation of 1984. And he's, looking very askance at his little telescreen there that's broadcasting very important messages to him, and also recording him as he sits there in his room, making sure he doesn't get up to anything that he shouldn't be. And maybe our new technologies are doing that as well. I mean, when you think about the number of times you will have clicked on one of those "I accept the terms and conditions" boxes without really, well, you don't really have a choice in what they say anyway. It's not like you can argue the terms, so you just tick it in order to use it. And who knows what we've ticked, what we've signed away by doing that. But yeah, we've got all these technologies in our lives, and they're all kind of doing these things, and some of them are, borderline scary when you start to think about them. And just think about, for instance, our walled garden again. Let's go back to our walled garden. And there's a hole in that wall. There it is. There's the hole in my wall. It's got a little telephone cable going into it, and that's how I get my internet. And through that little hole comes all of this stuff. Much more stuff in my life than ever before, because here I am talking to you through that little hole in my wall. And now I do have a TV license and a television in the corner, but actually a lot of the television I watch now is through the internet, and a lot of the radio, the sounds that I consume are through the internet. So this little hole in the wall here, very important, and it's hugely important about how I can see through that wall. I mean, who's standing in front of that hole, for instance? Well, think about it. My internet service provider is standing at the other side of that hole, for starters. So they might be blocking various websites. They certainly have they've given me a dreadful upload speed, which is impeding my abilities to communicate online. So that's just one thing. There's my government, and my government is blocking certain web pages. Even the UK government blocks certain web pages, let alone certain other countries with certain web pages that we consider quite important, like, say, Wikipedia or Google. And the lens through which we see all this is hugely important. And it's not even just the internet service providers and the governments. It's those programs that we're using to find the information. So as Siobhan was saying, as Susan's been saying, the algorithms that are involved in serving up the information that we see through Google, that's another lens. And what happens if those algorithms are a little bit dodgy? Be it because they're learning from the dodgy practices of other people who are searching, or because they're based on a foundation which is sort of got all those cultural biases that are packaged up in society anyway, the biases of the person who programmed something. So we have to constantly be vigilant about what lenses we're seeing the world through, especially now there are so many focus lenses that are coming through this little tiny hole in the wall. And that, to go back to what we were saying at the start of this session, they're a bit of a black box. These big corporations that we've given so much power to by ticking that little box, your Facebooks and your Googles of the world, Zoom even, we're giving them so much power, we're giving them so much information, and yet in return, we get some services that are quite useful, and maybe that's worth signing away some of those privileges. But also, there's this haze, there's this mystery within the box that we don't necessarily quite understand what's going on. And that is something that we need to understand, or at least need to be aware of, in order to fully be sure that what we're consuming is reality.
So, to conclude the talk, I think Susan's looked at some of the positives. She's looked at some of these great opportunities for reality in the future when we all live with dinosaurs or whatever else we'd like, if that's a bit scary for you. And Steph's looked at some of the warnings, some of the things we need to consider about the reality we're actually seeing and the reality we're actually getting. So I'm going to put a little activist hat on, not literally, and think about what we actually need to do and what the tech companies need to do to try and give us a better version of reality, to try and stop us being splintered off into too many versions that we don't want to be splintered off into. So if anyone works for a tech company, pay attention. So the first thing we're going to look at is thinking about that black box. We want to break open the black box wherever we can. We want to make sure that if we're using algorithms, we're transparent about how those decisions are being made and why they're being made. If an algorithm is choosing what you see, you want to be aware of that. You want to be aware of how it's making those decisions. And so we want technology to be designed in a way that's open enough that we can understand it too. It shouldn't be hidden in jargon that we don't get. Just using the word algorithm sometimes can be too confusing. We need to understand why the internet we get is what we see, and why decisions are being made about us all the time, why those decisions are being made. As well as that, we need to recognise that we already have different realities. Everyone in the world has different realities, different everyday lives. And technology needs to appreciate that. Technology needs to not just be designed for, you know, people who work in tech companies in certain bits of America or other places where there's big tech hubs for these companies to work in. We need to recognise different people's realities and make sure we're not encoding the biases of ignoring them into algorithms, into the way that we consume the internet, into any of these bits of software and platforms we've been talking about. And to do that, we need to focus on the human centre, to think about the fact that this is about humans and design it for them, design it for us, essentially. So we need to think about humans in this design. We need to open it up and let us realise that people are actually using this stuff. So you might think you can't do that, especially if you don't work for Google or Facebook. But what we've got to remember is the future doesn't just happen, we create it. So Hannah Fry said that in Hello World. And if I would say anything, I'd say, if you want to read more about algorithms and our place in the future of technology, go and read her book, Hello World, because it's really useful for this kind of stuff. But the future doesn't just happen. We are all creating it. By clicking accepting those terms and conditions, by using these platforms without questioning how they're working, we are just saying, yeah, that's fine. I don't mind if they take my data for that. Maybe you don't. If you genuinely don't, that's okay. But you've got to think about how it's affecting what you see, how it's affecting the information you can get hold of. We have the power to influence realities of the future, and we should use that power where we can.
The recording of this event will be available on the festival YouTube channel, which can be accessed from the Watch Again section of the festival website. However, please allow a couple of days for it to appear. We very much hope that you will continue to be engaged with York Festival of Ideas. Check out the website yorkfestivalofideas.com for full details of all the events in the festival program. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these events and continue the conversations using the hashtag YorkIdeas.
Thank you.